Welcome to a ride on the outside. MMA is full of people on the inside. But what about the ones that watch from beyond? Welcome to the MMA Outsiders with Tom Albano and Zain Bando on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network.
All right, we are here for episode number 42. Time once again for another edition of the MMA Outsiders. That's Zain Bando. I'm Tom Albano, as always. And Zain, for a week in which we said the MMA hype around the cards last week was looking very blah, and we had a very meh kind of UFC card, the least hyped I was for a UFC card in quite some time. I mean, it was very, very newsworthy in terms of just everything from the female MMA GOAT retiring, big performance by Charles Oliveira, all the Canadian fighters who could be on the card and won, and some really good stuff going on in PFL with probably, Zain, I think, my pick so far for the biggest upset of this MMA calendar year. The madness in Floyd Mayweather, Conor getting and stuff, and then Zain, you're gonna be live on coverage in Chicago for Bellator 297 this weekend.
Yeah, I will be back on the boots on the ground on the coverage scene for Bellator 297. For those of you who don't know by now, Bellator is back in the Windy City. Wintrust Arena is the site, and it is a massive, massive card with two huge title fights topping the bill. So it should be a very star-studded event, and I cannot wait to be there. I will be covering it for BJPen.com. Just wanted to quickly shout out Chris Taylor and site director Scott Hernandez for once again giving me the wonderful opportunity to cover the sport that I love so much. So I can't wait to be there, giving you guys coverage both for this show, as usual. As you see, most of the BJ Penn interviews that I do get flagshipped to our podcast, and as well as the coverage for them. So it should be a wonderful event and just another big card off the bucket list that I can say that I will have attended. So I cannot wait to be there. And obviously we have a lot of other news and notes to get to, but before we get into that, be sure to like and subscribe. Be sure to share the show everywhere across social media platforms. Follow us everywhere at ETB Network, at MMA Outsiders ETB. Again, my name is Zain Bando. I am a staff writer for BJPen.com. I am also a member of the Bellator rankings panel, so you can find me and the rest of the media members' rankings after every single Bellator event. So if you ever have any scrutiny, you can direct it towards me and the other 20 plus members on the panel. Be my guest. I'm always open for debate about that. But yeah, you can find my stuff over at bjpen.com. Follow me at ZainBando99. And then, of course, Tom, to my left, my other fellow co-host, you can find his work over at Fansided MMA as he keeps pumping out recaps every single week and is doing great work already for the PFL Leps. You'll catch him for every PFL event for the rest of this season and going forward, I would presume. So a lot to be excited about on the MMA Outsiders front in terms of coverage and what have you. So yes, to conclude, I am very excited to be in Chicago for what should be the biggest Bellator event of the year thus far, without a doubt.
Yeah, really, really stacked Bellator card, which we will get into our little main card preview towards the end of the show. But before we do, Zain, a lot we got to recap from this past weekend. Little news elements here and here, but obviously, Zain, the big story that's going on in the MMA sphere is the end of one of the greatest careers that mixed martial arts has seen, specifically women's mixed martial arts has seen. The GOAT, the consensus GOAT, Amanda Nunes, calling it a career, put a one-sided whooping over Irene Aldana in, let's be honest, a fight that was pure trash, although I side that more with the fault towards one fighter than I do the other. And, I mean, Zain, the hype coming into UFC 289 was very meh. the consensus has always been that Canadian UFC cards, for whatever reason, are quite cursed. And it doesn't take away, Zan, it doesn't take away from the fact that there were elements of this card that were kind of blah. But I think if we remember this card for one reason, and one reason only, it is because the GOAT has called it a career.
Oh, 1,000%. I mean, this is something that you and I'm pretty positive, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. This is something that you and I have hinted at regularly on this show that we could very well see this happen. I certainly was expecting it with a win, just considering that, Irene Aldana was another challenger in a long line of challengers, and most of them she's already beaten, but she's another one in a long line of challengers where I could say that they are the next generation of the UFC women's bantamweight division. So I guess that was cool to see in that regard. But I think, her legacy is going to be, and I know this is kind of off the question, but her legacy is going to be, who she dethroned. I mean, she beat everybody in her path to being the greatest female fighter personally that I've ever seen. The way she dismantled Holly Holm, the way she knocked out Chris Cyborg, the way she successfully knocked out Ronda Rousey and sent her into retirement. I mean, she's had so many memorable performances, the very close fights with Valentina. I mean, and she's just going to be remembered as someone that transcended women's MMA into making it as big as it is. And you knew that when Amanda Nunes was fighting, that she was always going to bring it. She was always going to look to try to finish you, and that was no secret in the fight against Aldana. Outside of one small combination from Aldana, it seemed like Nunes could do whatever she wanted to her, and just every second of the fight, you could tell that the champ was just in complete control. I will say this though, you have to give credit to Irene Aldana. She did fail to become the fourth Mexican UFC champion that we would have had this year, but I will say her toughness was very noticeable. It's definitely a good learning experience for her, without question. But I think this is one of those performances where she can go back to the drawing board. Bantamweight is still a stacked division. There's still plenty of fights out there for her. Still plenty of big names out there for her. I don't think this is the last of Aldana, but I will say this. I do think Nunes is leaving women's bantamweight in a better place than when she first got into it. And I think it just goes to show how strong that division is, just considering how many former champions are in that weight class, and just how supremely she's dominated everyone. And I think it'll be nice to see some new blood in the future. And truly, if you want to use one word to describe her career, it would have to be masterful, in my opinion.
I think Zan, she always managed to put on some masterclass performances. Now I think back, Zan, to her championship reigns ever since it began with UFC 200. Actually, Zan, if we want to go further back, I mean, they were talking about it, John Anik, DC, and the others on the at the commentary table and in the studio, uh, that Amanda Nunes, it looked like she might be on her way earlier in her career to more of a journeywoman kind of style career. I mean, you take into consideration the loss to Kat Zingano, I think it was at UFC 178, and then from there on, something clicked in her where she can continue to win, submitted Misha Tate, had a huge opportunity after all the madness and shaking up at that UFC 200 card when it came to the main event slot, whether it be the Connor Nate whole thing where Connor doesn't show up to a press conference, John Jones failing the drug test. Amanda Nunes gets elevated into the main event slot, wins in pretty dominating fashion, um, pummels Ronda Rousey in less than a minute. Now, I know everyone could say, well, that was not the Ronda Rousey of old. And you're right, it was not the Ronda Rousey of old. And it
No.
didn't help when, 2017 wasn't exactly a great year, when you had the whole thing with Valentina Shevchenko, first the last minute fight cancellation in that year's International Fight Week, that big July card, and then when they actually fought Nunes Shevchenko, too controversial decision. Many, including myself to this day, thinking that Shevchenko won that fight, but alas, Nunes got the nod from the judges. But ever since then, I would say the Rocky Pennington fight in May of 2018, what we saw was just, uh, and you add in the two fights from 2016 plus, not counting that 2017, whatever the heck that was. Yeah, Raquel Pennington, she ran through. Chris Cyborg, she ran through. Holly Holm, she runs through. Jermaine Durandamy, she runs through. Felicia Spencer, she runs through. Megan Anderson, she runs through. Then you've got the whole thing. I'll call it her Rocky III moment, where she eats a pretty bad loss in upset fashion to Juliana Pena. But you know what she does then, Zen? She comes back that next fight, that rematch, destroys her, and then absolutely destroys Irene Aldana, which, Zan, did I not say it was going to be a 50-43 scorecard in there? And
You
in
did.
reality, I mean, yes, you can say that Aldana did not do her job. Aldana was in frozen mode, complete frozen mode. She had, she brought nothing to the table of a championship caliber kind of fight. But Amanda Nunes just has had this absolute aura to her, this absolute, this absolute showcasing to her. Pardon me, my alarm clock just went off for whatever reason. Uh, has had this absolute aura to her, and nobody seemed to be able to stop her. And it was just, it's one of the best runs I think I have ever seen from a mixed martial arts champion. Now, granted, you can make if you want to make the comparison, I know some people will, trying to get into the intricacies of, the kind of competition that Nunes faced, the kind of competition that, say, the Anderson Silvas of this world have faced. But, I mean, Zan, if the likes of Ronda Rousey and Misha Tate helped elevate women's mixed martial arts into more of a mainstream kind of role, getting it all the attention, Amanda Nunes, and you could say some others as well, like your Chris Cyborgs and your Valentina Shevchenkos, but Amanda Nunes is basically the one who really took the ball and ran with it all the way to the end zone, and then I would say all the way to the end zone multiple times.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. And I was also going to piggyback off that and say that she was the one who defined that, yes, women in mixed martial arts can be dominant for several years across. Now, I know this is more so of a joke, but I have to say it because the record books indicated not only did she showcase her dominance as a women's MMA fighter, period, but she also showed that she could do it across multiple divisions, which I don't even care if 145 is what it is. Winning two belts across two different divisions is not easy to do, and she made it look easy times a million. I don't know if I've ever seen someone win two belts as easily as she did, and she proved that it can be done, and it can be done successfully, and it absolutely was.
Yeah, absolute great performances. I mean, Zan, which of Nunes's fights would you say is your absolute all-time favorite, all-time fantastic performance? Because as much as I am a Chris Cyborg fan, I have to say that performance that she laid in knocking out Cyborg in about a minute was just completely unbelievable and jaw dropping. I mean, say what you will about women's featherweight, but it's a performance unlike anything. Like, we didn't see anybody dominate Chris Cyborg the way that Nunes dominated her, and we've never seen anybody dominate Chris Cyborg since. Obviously, there's also the Ronda Rousey fight that sticks out of my mind just because I was going insane over. Oh my God, Ronda Rousey got pieced up in 46 seconds. And you can throw a little penalty on there that basically Ronda Rousey was not that Ronda Rousey, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, most definitely. I would say my favorite performance of hers, just for the sole fact of history making alone, was without a doubt her Ronda Rousey win. I mean, that entire year, it just felt like Ronda Rousey coming back was the biggest thing that the sport could have needed. First off, it gets sold. UFC 200 doesn't go as the promotion plans. UFC 202 is a blockbuster success with McGregor and Diaz. UFC 205 absolutely kills it in the promotion's debut at Madison Square Garden. And then you get UFC 207, this rare Friday night card. And we didn't really know how it was going to go. Amanda Nunes got no promotion for that fight whatsoever. Ronda Rousey opted out of all of the pre-fight media availabilities. Everything she could possibly opt out of, he did. I think Ronda was really the only one shown on that countdown show. From what I can remember, Nunes was barely shown on that. And she goes out in under a minute and just absolutely piecemeals who people thought to be the greatest female fighter that we had ever seen to that point. And after seeing that, and I had watched Nunes for a while, but after seeing that, I'm like, oh my goodness, she's either never going to lose the belt or it's going to take a long time for someone to beat her because she is absolutely amazing. And you want to talk about the run that she's been on? I don't care how many people had to criticize those. She had some, easy wins in there. For example, like a Megan Anderson. You could argue Felicia Spencer was probably an easy win, but think about the amount of former champions she beat. Hang on a second. She beat Miesha Tate, Ronda Rousey, Jermaine Durandamy, and Valentina Shevchenko. Just those four alone, I mean, that's not even half of a run, but just those four alone make you go, wow. And they were almost all consecutively in a row. I think this goes to show how dominant she really was. And I don't think we're really going to realize her dominance until she is finally a member of the UFC Hall of Fame in what we would assume would be 2024.
Yeah, and I assume, Zan, that basically, I think Anik assumed it as well, that she will probably headline the class of 2024 next year in Las Vegas during International Fight Week, which I think is a well-deserved and a absolutely needed kind of honor for somebody who basically was flat out was the GOAT of this sport in terms of women's mixed martial arts. I think, Zan, that her run and her abilities make her better than some of the men in this sport. She has done things that are absolutely unbelievable. You mentioned the championship caliber performances and opponents that she has faced. And other than the Valentina Shevchenko controversy, uh, those other champions that you named, she not only won, she beat them in dominant fashion. So here's to Amanda Nunes. I mean, yes, could we have had a better fight to go out on than this? Absolutely. But can we take away from the moment that she had where basically, all of her run and I mean, Zan, there are so few athletes, not just in mixed martial arts, in sports in general, that get to go out on top. Not everybody is John Elway or Peyton Manning. Not everybody gets to basically, have their big send off where they are a champion. Um, I guess if you want to make the Chicago connection, Rossi himself, 2016 with the Cubs. But Amanda Nunes got to do that. I mean, it's especially harder in mixed martial arts to go out on top. The common thing with combat sports, mixed martial arts, even stretching to pro wrestling, is you go out on your back and let the next generation take over. Amanda Nunes did not need to do that. Amanda Nunes just pummeled everybody that was in her way. And if she ever had a stumble, she rebounded. It is one of the dream mixed martial arts careers. Her run from 2015 to today, one of the best runs in this sport we have ever seen. And nothing else to do, I think, Zan, but just give the little salute to Amanda Nunes and see you in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, for sure. And for the detractors who say, "Oh, it's 1-1 with Pena, you should do the trilogy," I think 50-44 is good enough to say, yeah, that chapter is closed. You want to talk about? I'm going to go out and say that is the most dominant immediate rematch that I've ever seen in UFC history. Right? I've never seen an immediate rematch so one sided in my life in that fight where that made me go, yeah, I don't need to ever see that again. That's for sure. But now we have to look towards the future. So now we're going to be looking at a women's bantamweight
Yeah,
division.
absolutely not. That was, I mean, if I remember everybody piling on, including Dana, about, oh, we can't give Chris Cyborg that rematch with Nunes because she got beat under a bit. 50-44 and 50-43 so just completely, no. Nunes made the point that Pena's first victory over her, shot in the dark. That, the 10th time out of the one time out of 10 times where Pena would beat her. And by the way, I'm going to go right here. Juliana Pena, I'm going to be very critical of. Absolutely horrendous sportsmanship. Absolutely pitiful behavior in the wake of Amanda Nunes' retirement, saying, "Oh, she's running from me. I deserve the trilogy fight. I'm the first real mom in this sport. Give me a break." Absolutely not. Yeah, I wish, I'm sorry. It just bugs me the way that she's acting.
Yeah, not really to piggyback off of what you just said, which I agree with. Tom, I have a perfect idea for what I think should be the vacant UFC women's bantamweight title fight post Amanda Nunes' retirement. Do you want to hear it? Because it's a bit of a hot take.
Okay.
I think it should be Holly Holm versus Juliana Pena. You want to talk about big business? I understand that Holly Holm is at a million chances. I know that she's lost to Chris Cyborg and Amanda Nunes. I know she probably doesn't deserve it again. But you want to talk about the UFC's new way of thinking, which is all about putting the money first? I really do think, in all honesty, that would be the fight that gives a little bit of fire back into the bantamweight division and gets people talking again, and also could put one of these two old Nunes rivals back on a pedestal that, in my opinion, they so deserve. And honestly, I think out of the two that would draw the most interest, I think it's those two, and I think it would be a massive fight. I am going to be predicting that is going to be the first UFC Women's Bantamweight vacant title fight, and it will take place December 16th as the co-main event at T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. Signed, sealed, delivered. You can write the date down, June 13th, Tuesday morning. Pena versus Holm for the Bantamweight title.
Really? We gotta give Holly Holm another shot. Now, granted, it's not technically a terrible idea. Juliana Pena, as much as I just ripped on her for her unprofessionalism in the wake of Nunes' retirement, she is the number one contender. She does have the win over Nunes. You gotta put her in the vacant title fight. It's just a matter of who you put, against her. Now, Holly Holm is technically ranked number 3 in the women's bantamweight ranking, so that's an understandable matchup. That's one that I wouldn't be surprised if the UFC makes, because they're number 1. They're very close in terms of contendership. They're both in the top 5, and let me quote Hank and Victor from Game On. Zain, it's all about the money.
Yeah,
It is all about the money.
Yeah, it's all about the money for sure. And hey, if it's not December 16th, I think a perfect backdrop for the UFC's return to Chicago for the first time since 2019. Juliana Pena with Chicago ties. Put me in the building. Co-main or main event at the United Center. It needs to happen now, only because I'm saying it and I want to be either for it. So now I'm actually really hoping that the fight happens. I think I've psyched myself up a little bit too much, but honestly, I just think it makes monetary sense, and I think it's a very exciting fight, and I think it's a fight that could be a coin flip either way. but I think Pena wins and regains her championship, and I think it starts this whole circus of who is she going to fight next, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think you might see the same crop of challengers just keep rolling and rolling and rolling out. So,
well, what would you say about, because they're actually, again, that's 1 versus 3. There is somebody in between at a number 2, that being Raquel Rocky Pennington, who
but
is
hang
another
on,
favorite challenge.
but hang on a second. Do we really want to see? Do we really want to see Raquel Pennington in a pay-per-view co-headlining spot on a Vegas card? Don't get me wrong. I like her a lot. I like her a lot. To me, she just doesn't have the personality that a Pena or Holm does, or the star power that either of those do, which is why I think it makes more sense from a business perspective. From a
Yeah.
fight perspective, 1 versus 2, that totally makes sense. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, let me throw another option in there, because
Okay.
Irene Aldana was ranked number 5. So, and obviously Zan, with the way, I know she was Amanda Nunes' last opponent, but the way she fought, I mean, Zan, the way that Liz Carmouche fought against Valentina Shevchenko in a title fight got her released. The way Irene Aldana fought, you can't justify putting her in the next title fight simply because she was Nunes' most recent opponent. That leaves
No,
us, and if
agreed.
we're gonna focus on top 5,
Agreed. Yep.
that leaves us then, Zan, with number 4, Ketlin Vieira.
Yeah, and Ketlin Vieira is an outlier in this whole thing because she's silently gone up the ranks as being one of the best contenders that the division has to offer. So I think the biggest loser in this whole thing might actually be her, because now it's where does she go from here, and does she and Aldana make sense next? It'll be very interesting to see what the UFC does with her. No question about it. Yeah.
And I can see your perspective on that. I can see your point, because had Amanda Nunes stayed, then Ketlin Vieira would be the next logical challenger for Nunes to fight, because that would have been such a fresh matchup. Now, granted, Zan, there is a blessing to this, as you kind of alluded to. Old names that never got the opportunity because of Nunes' dominant run will get the opportunity again to stake their claim, be a champion, and have a little crack at this, run at the top. So there is always that fresh element. Granted, it's older names, but I mean,
Well,
Zan, maybe Ketlin Vieira is the biggest loser in this, but I could see, Zan, an instance where within 1 or 2 fights, she's fighting for the title, and I might pick somebody like a Ketlin Vieira against whoever, a Holly Holm or a Juliana Pena. And once Vieira has the belt, that is what will really pique my interest with women's bantamweight.
well, do you think Vieira beats Penny Kinsey when they fight later this year?
I'm gonna say yes. I believe in Ketlin Vieira.
Okay, that fight is on July 22nd. As a heads up, that will be in London. So yeah, that is a must win for her, considering she just lost to Raquel Pennington. Well, you're exactly right. Yeah, yeah.
For sure. Now, as women's featherweight goes, well, I wish Zan I had the song "The Taps" with the trumpet, because it looks like what we have been expecting for is happening. Women's featherweight, according to Dana White, with Amanda Nunes' retirement is donezo.
That's very true. And let's be honest, Tom, women's featherweight was built for Chris Cyborg. Once Chris Cyborg lost, the division was basically a washout, and Amanda Nunes was essentially keeping the belt as a placeholder. And obviously, we know what happened there. So, yeah, I think it is the long overdue right time for the UFC to abolish the women's featherweight division and look at other options to try to build women's MMA in a different way. The only unfortunate thing, though, is that they'll have 3 divisions now instead of 4 divisions, which we'll get into your little nugget that you were going to mention in a second, which I actually think is fascinating. But yeah, I think this is the right decision from the UFC brass, and I really think there's nothing that they can do about women's featherweight other than abolish it or hope that there's a diamond in the rough somewhere, which I highly doubt. So yeah, I think they're making the right decision in that regard.
I mean, on one hand, it kind of stinks when now number one, we're losing a division for the UFC. Number two, you have women's featherweight popping up in Bellator, in one championship. And Zan, the PFL's women's division is not women's lightweight this year. It's women's featherweight, which means, that, got all these bigger promotions that are doing women's featherweight and the UFC isn't, but there is another strategy. There could be another strategy to get another women's weight class and build women's MMA in a different way. Now, Zan, I will say, as much as we talk about, it was built for somebody like a Chris Cyborg, or it allowed Amanda Nunes to have this champ status and have, add to her legacy. Part of this is not Cyborg and Nunes' fault. The UFC basically wasted opportunities it could have had in building women's featherweight. Zan, it dedicated part of a tough season to women's featherweight, and all they did was pick a whole bunch of women's bantamweights and say, okay, you're moving up for this season, you're moving up for this season, and then, yeah, after this tough season, you can all go back down to women's bantamweight and come to the UFC.
Yeah, so I guess that leads me to my next question. If let's take the other side and say that women's featherweight is not dead, do you try to make a push for Kayla Harrison, or do you think it's too late?
I think it's way, way too late. And I think, Sam, as I kind of alluded to weeks ago, I think with the whole negotiations, how Kayla Harrison resigned, PFL not doing a pay per view this year, I think that there's a better chance than by the end of 2023 that Kayla Harrison might be going over to Bellator to try and get that Cyborg Harrison fight. Now, it will be interesting, Zan, on that note, to see if those rumors about a PFL Bellator merger do happen, and that, and then we could still see some sort of Cyborg uh Harrison fight. And considering that both Bellator and the PFL have women's featherweight this year, that, we could see a pretty more expansive women's featherweight division, more opportunity for 145 pounders in this sport. But then the other straw to that, Zan, is Kayla Harrison is not in this women's featherweight season. And Zan, Kayla Harrison has competed at women's lightweight.
Oh,
She's
I
competed at
know.
55 pounds. So, regardless of what happens to Kayla Harrison, that's going to be the other caveat to all this: is she going to be willing to make the cut to 145?
Very well said. And on a side note, if Cyborg versus Kayla Harrison happens in Bellator, you better believe I'm doing everything I can to make that trip out, because that's a super fight that is just can't miss. If people can physically do everything they can to be there for that potential super fight, I would highly, highly recommend it, because it's the highest level of women's MMA that you are going to see outside of the UFC, bar none. So if that fight happens, you better believe I'm making every effort in my power to make sure that I am there the night of that fight. And it better be, if I know Bellator's a Friday promotion, but if they want to bring back a Saturday card just for that one fight, I'm all in. I'm all in for that. No doubt about it.
I don't blame you for those kind of feelings. So, Zan, let's do a little bit of a flip.
All right.
So, women's featherweight is likely done, but there has sparked a little rumor online that about, basically replacing the division of sorts, and what else the UFC can do for women's MMA in its promotion. And I think I might have the answer. I hinted at it
Okay.
a few weeks ago. I hinted at it a few weeks ago. The online, the MMA Twitter sphere is all chirping it up about it. And then a few years ago, during pandemic time, Dana White was asked about it and said, "We're looking into it, but not yet." Well, with women's featherweight done, there's an even more in-depth and arguably important kind of weight class. And that, Zan, is atom weight, 105 pounds. What are the chances, Zan, you think that sooner than later, maybe within the next year, maybe two, we get a UFC atomweight division.
60-40. I think it's all going to depend on, can Invicta put on a huge Fight Pass event that showcases the best atom weights in the world to find out who can be signed to the UFC in almost a mini Dana White Contender Series of sorts. And I think that will determine your answer. What do you think?
I could very well see that. I could very well see Zan them doing what they did with women's flyweight and what they did with women's strawweight, and essentially maybe do a whole tough season in the looks of determining the inaugural atomweight champion.
And
Uh,
make it a March
I,
Madness style bracket, 1 versus 16, et cetera, et cetera.
yep, yep, absolutely. I mean, Zan, you can look at Invicta, you can look at one championship, Horizon. There are atom weights out there. It's just a matter of, like you said, Zan, can the UFC go looking for these ladies, sign these ladies, and in the case of a promotion like Invicta, which the UFC has a partnership with and broadcasts on UFC Fight Pass, can they, as you said, put on, enough of a display where people will have an interest in this kind of division? I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that maybe we can get this division into the UFC.
I'm hopeful too, and I think it will open a door of women's MMA that may have not been possible 5 or 6 years ago, without a doubt, no doubt about it.
Cool. All right. Let's get off of all the Amanda Nunes and what's next talk and focus on the co-main event of the evening. Zan, what did we say? We said for Charles Oliveira, like he needed a big kind of performance if it meant, a potential title rematch with Islam Makhachev, and well, he delivered. Charlie Olives was back in a big way, needing about 3 or 4 minutes to just quickly finish Beneil Dariush. And Zan, I mean, it wasn't even close. I thought this was going to be a fight where, the first takedown kind of won the fight. I thought maybe it would be a whole grappling display. No, Charles Oliveira just kind of ran through. He came out to fight. He came
Yeah,
out with a fire under him.
yeah, he came out to fight. He came out like he was a man possessed, and he just absolutely destroyed Beneil Dariush in every facet. You want to talk about a dominant bounce back win after losing your title in your previous fight? Look no further than his performance, because Oliveira just proved that he is still one of the baddest dudes, not just in MMA, but in combat sports, period. And oh my goodness, Tom, a potential rematch against Islam Makhachev only gives me goosebumps, and will definitely be, if it happens in October, which we hope it will, and that's what Dana would like to see next, even into that at the post-fight press conference, that if this fight happens, not only does it have a chance to blow up the doors of Etihad Arena, it has a chance to be, in my opinion, the biggest lightweight title fight in almost 5 years. And I also think Oliveira truly, I think, just goes to show that Brazilian MMA is still alive and well. He's still proving that Brazilians can compete at the highest level. And the last 5, 6 years of his career have just been nothing short of amazing. And you thought that Oliveira might have been done after the Makhachev fight. He proved all the doubters wrong in this Dariush performance. And let me tell you what, if this rematch happens, there's no way in the world after that Dariush performance that this rematch will be exactly the same, because Oliveira will look to go in there and try to hurt Makhachev. And in my opinion, it has a chance to be one of the biggest rematches in recent UFC history, if not of all time, without a shadow of a doubt.
That is quite the take. That is quite the bold statement to make about the kind of rematch. I mean, Islam Makhachev is still a killer. I know there are maybe some questions about Islam Makhachev after his performance against Alexander Volkanovski in February, but absolutely Charles Oliveira deserves this rematch. I know there's all the talk about, I mean, we got Justin Gaethje and Dustin Poirier having their BMF title fight in late July. I think, San, that's just going to be the kind of firefight that you expect with Charles Oliveira and Islam Makhachev in a potential rematch in October. I think Poirier and Gaethje in their rematch in late July, July 29th. They're going to put on such a display and injure one another, Zan, that I think 2 months is going to be too quick of a turnaround. Connor and Chandler, obviously, you've got, tough going on, and we don't know if that fight is even going to happen at this rate. So
Hey,
I think it makes the most.
Don't worry. Don't worry. The fight's going to happen. It just hasn't been announced yet. Hold your horses. We're all waiting for it. In my opinion, there's no way you build a tough season around Conor McGregor and the fight. So I am hopeful until it is officially announced. I am still going to believe that with the Ultimate Fighter season, that McGregor versus Chandler is going to happen. And also, Tom, you're kind of being a downer. This is one of the best stretches in UFC lightweight division history. So we better hope that all of these fights happen because they have to.
I know. My point, Zan. Well, first of all, I have some breaking news. Michael Chandler is out, and he's going to be replaced by the Miami Heat mascot. And second of all,
first reported by Ben the Bane Davis.
and second of all, Zan, my point was, it just makes, with all the timing and everything, and this kind of performance that he has, it just makes the most logical sense that you have to do the rematch next. Besides, technically, Zan, Oliveira never lost his title in the cage. He lost it on the scales against Gaethje. In his last 2 fights, he has proven he can make the 155-pound weight limit again. So I think you got to give him the rematch, especially with the way he ran through Darius.
Absolutely. And just as a reminder, the uncrowned champ has a name, and his name is Charles Oliveira.
I mean, that post-fight promo was just absolutely unbelievable. He had a good one, and
that was
off the chart. I loved it. I didn't know Charles Oliveira spoke English now.
No, I didn't either.
I don't think anybody did. He didn't need the translator for that interview. But man, I mean, also the crowd reception, Zan. You would think that maybe Canada would be a second home for Charles Oliveira, because I think, Zan, he got just as warm of a reception as the kind of reception Amanda Nunes got in her retirement. They were loud in Canada. They were loud in Vancouver.
They were for sure. And I think it just goes to show that Oliveira has fans everywhere, no matter where you put him. And I just really think he's a must-see TV. And honestly, I hope he fights in America more often, because, as you know, I've been more than grateful and lucky enough to see some very famous fighters in person. He's another one that I would be more than happy to check off the list. That was an absolutely amazing performance on Saturday, without a doubt. And you want to talk about Abu Dhabi being a destination for fights in October. That's as big of a possible main event as you can get. And you better believe that UFC 295 is going to be massive if that fight actually takes place as the main event.
Absolutely. All right, let's run through quickly the rest of the main card. Zan, Mike Malott putting on, the clean sweep, 5-0 for Canadian fighters on this UFC 289 card, submitting Adam Target. And Zan, Mike Malott also post-fight promo, just chef's kiss. Absolutely fantastic. I think Mike Malott I think he is now the Canadian prospect to watch at this rate.
Oh, I think so too. And that leads me to a question that I've been wanting to ask you. Is Mike Malott headlining a UFC fight night in the realm of possibility? Because I would say yes.
I could see it. I don't know about immediate. I think if something a little more immediate would be more of a co-main event slot. But
okay,
if Mike Malott continues on the way he's been on the run he's been going, I could definitely see a Canada Fight Night card with him as a headliner, if he can continue to go on the momentum that he's going on.
Yeah, very impressive win, and shout out to him in full Saturday, the big weekend of business, and he was definitely part of it. It's cool to see the Canadian fans get behind one of their own again after having a dry spell post George St. Pierre. So it's great to see that somebody else has picked up the slack, and he made Adam Fuggett look like he was he was not an amateur, but he definitely made he didn't look like he was very green in his career. That's a little bit of a concern considering that he was fighting on a pay-per-view and he did not show up to par. So it'll be interesting to see where Adam goes from here. Definitely a devastating loss on his end, though, without a doubt.
Well, let's talk about that, Sam, because yes, I get what the UFC was trying to do, get as much Canadian talent on this card as possible, have them do, the 5-0 run and such. But, I mean, why is, and no disrespect to these two, why is Mike Mallet versus Adam Foggett the featured bout prior to the co-main and main event on a pay-per-view card?
Yeah, to me, that should have been the main event of the prelims, and Curtis Imhoff should have opened the main card. That's what I think.
Yeah, and again, coming out of a card, Sam, one of the fighters I feel the most bad for is Chris Curtis. I mean, he gets gypped off of a pay-per-view main card again after what happened the first time with him and Raul Rosas Jr. And then his fight with Nasruddin goes to the no contest, and he's left with an abrasion around his eye, 10 stitches, potential surgery where it could put him out for the rest of the year. Chris Curtis is, the guy I feel the most bad for. Probably one of the bigger losers, not lost in the record books, but losers in that, just a really disappointing weekend for him.
Yeah, and also, you forgot to mention, and also a fight that was arguably pretty close up until that happened.
Yeah. You know who I am happy for, though, Zin? I am happy for the Hawaiian Dan Ige getting the decision win over Nate Lander. That was a win that Dan Ige needed. Dan Ige is a hell of a talent at featherweight, and if there is a win that he needed, a pretty significant one-sided kind of display that he needed, it was this one.
Oh, for sure. And, I think it was a good warning experience for Nate Landwehr. He's always an exciting fighter. He'll be back, but Dan Ige's experience definitely played a factor in this one, and he fought extremely well from the second the fight started until it was over. Used his wrestling well, and looked like the Dan Ige of old. He should be very proud.
And then the main card did open, Zan, with Marc-Andre Barriault, the former TKO champion, getting a win in his home country to kick things off on the main card. 30-27 sweep of the scorecards against Eric Yaboy Anders.
Yeah, and this was a fight where it looked like it could have been finished at any point, and Andre Barriault just looked awesome. And Eric Anders is a tough guy too, but there was something about the Canadian flavor in the air that night that made it seem like there was no way any of the fighters from Canada could lose, and he definitely showed that, without a doubt.
Yeah, for sure. Notable prelim performances, as I mentioned, San. The one I felt the most bad for, Chris Curtis. However, San, I can't take away from some of the other performances we had on this card when it came to the Canadian crowd. I mean, I think, San, first of all, I got to mention Steven Urseg, who gets a performance of the night bonus, even though he didn't even get a finish. That's rare to see from Dana White.
Very, very rare.
But the fact that he beat David Dvorak, that was an upset. That was a big upset.
Oh, for sure. And anyone who didn't know who Ursig was before Saturday, they definitely know who he is now. That guy has a chance to be a massive talent in the future if he stays on the run that he's on. He looked tremendous on Saturday. I was very impressed. I had only ever seen him fight once before that, back on the regional scene a couple of months ago. So I was curious to see how he would do, especially taking the fight on short notice. He looked outstanding.
And then, I mean, Sam, the other big name to talk about, really, Ayman Zahabi, a.k.a. Ariel Helwani, putting on an incredible 64-second knockout in his prelim fight. As you said, Sam, I feel bad for the UFC intern every time that he fights. Because there go the Ariel Helwani tags, which I'm sure makes Dana happy.
Oh yeah, I'm just glad that I was not on the other side of the keyboard, because if I was the UFC intern, I would have been frantically texting you asking what to do, as my mentions are just bombarded with people saying, "Wasn't he banned a long time ago? Why is he fighting? I've never seen him fight before," etc., etc. And it would have just been so confusing. It would have been so confusing, but so funny at the same time. So anyway, I just wanted to give my thoughts and, and potential prayers out to whoever is to whoever was running the UFC social media after 7 p.m. Central, because I truly felt bad for them as he was pulled off by the referee. I'm like, this is going to be an absolute field day from the MMA Twitterverse, and sure enough, it was. Some of the gifts were actually pretty funny, so I just had to mention that too.
I mean, San, remember that Helwani boxing from a few years ago, pandemic time? It's really paying off now.
It sure is. Long live Helwani boxing forever.
Other name, I guess, San, the only other name I could really think of with a big performance was Jasmine Jasudavicius with her deep decision win over a talent like Miranda Maverick. Overall, I mean, San, like I said, we'll remember this card because Amanda Nunes retired. But her fight with Irene Aldana was trash. Charles Oliveira, big performance. Canadian, good feels for Canadians, but I don't know, Zan. I still feel somewhat. I feel a little bit more towards the up, but I'm still kind of like, compared to. It goes back to what I said, Zan. After the legendary run of events we had January through April, we were going to get a couple of downers like May and June were.
Yeah, I'm going to be generous and give this card a B minus, based on the sole fact that Amanda Nunes did retire and it was a feel good moment.
You know what? You and I are on the same page. I'm going to agree. B minus. I don't think it was. I still earns a passing grade. It's definitely better than some of the fight nights we've seen, but I would still, out of all the UFC pay-per-views we've had this year, I would still place this number. Actually, no, this is pay-per-view number 7 of the year, so number 7 out of 7.
I wouldn't. It's hard to disagree with that. It would have been in the C minus range for me had the co-main event not been good.
Yeah, absolutely. Amanda Nunes and Charles Oliveira, San, as we kind of figured, as we said going into this event, pretty much carried this pay-per-view.
1000%. You are exactly right.
All right. Let's talk about Zan, my realm, for a little bit. Let's talk about the Professional Fighters League, who had kicked off the second half of their season this past Thursday. Zan, in my opinion, perhaps right now the biggest upset in the year of 2023 in mixed martial arts. Jesus Pinedo. He needed a first-round finish, basically, to, get into the postseason. And what does he do? He gets a first-round knockout, knocks out the PFL's star at featherweight, knocks out Brendan Loughnane, sending him out of the playoffs and Chris Wade out of the playoffs. Then just that was my mind. I jumped out of my chair as I saw him land the right that dropped Loughnane.
Well, we've been very critical of the PFL so far this season. So to see them come back with a shocking main event result like that is definitely the boost that the PFL needed for the remainder of the season. And I instantly thought of you as you were blowing me up, telling me about this knockout, because I had just seen it as your messages were going through. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is absolutely absurd. And I was checking out the card like every so often just to see like how the fights were. I'm like, this card is fun. This is a good card. So of course I tuned in for the main event, not expecting much, and I see one name get knocked out. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me.
Zan, this PFL 4 was an absolutely fun card, and I mean, Zan, you had plenty of finishes at the PFL's third card back in April, in the middle of April, and that combined with Zan, just the overall card of what PFL 4 was, I think PFL is showing that the first two, say what you will about the first two PFL cards of the season, they've kind of bounced back quite a bit, and now we're in the fun of it again. And Jesus Pinedo really, I mean, Zan, it's the incredible moments like that. It's the incredible moments that the PFL is able to create. Zan, we've talked about how the PFL is big with upsets. We've talked about how the PFL is big with the mind blowing moments, and this is just another one that Jesus Pinedo, his next fight is going to be in August in the semifinals in San Antonio against Bubba Jenkins, the top ranked fighter at featherweight.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a phenomenal next PFL card. And anytime Bubba Jenkins fights, you just know it's going to be always action. So that should be very fun.
I can't wait that the possibility that we could have in the PFL featherweight championship this year, Bubba Jenkins against Movlin.
No doubt. And that's a fight that I wouldn't underestimate Mulvey's chances. I think if Jenkins isn't careful, he might lose that fight for sure.
I mean, he's the Movlin was the 2021 champion, I believe, for a reason.
Yep, exactly.
All right. All right. The other thing that a couple other headlines coming out of the PFL cards, and Marlon Moraes retiring for good. Caught Gabriel Braga late, but Gabriel Braga managed to land a counter shot that dropped Moraes out cold. 7 straight knockout loss. Marlon Moraes retired. He had left his gloves in the cage immediately following the card. Marlon Moraes versus Braga was the headliner to the opening ESPN Plus card. And Zan, I know if you want it before anybody out there says, oh, well, it's for now because he did this with the UFC as well. The Nevada State Athletic Commission, Zan, has earlier yesterday stepped in and basically suspended Moraes indefinitely. And after 7 straight knockouts,
as they should,
you have to.
Oh, yeah. No doubt.
I mean, a big ups to Marlon Moraes on an incredible career, starting Zan with the PFL's predecessor of the World Series of Fighting, becoming their bantamweight champion, having an incredible run there, coming Zan so close to winning the UFC bantamweight championship, but after that loss to Cejudo, things just were not the same.
No, and as you know, I was at that Cejudo fight, and it very much looked like Moraes was on his way to winning the title. He obviously didn't, and he just has not looked the same since. I don't know if it's a confidence issue or what it is, but I just think, I think his years got the best of him, and obviously his chin isn't holding up the way it used to be. And Braga is a tough guy. He's a guy to definitely keep an eye on, and that's without a doubt his biggest win in terms of name value of his career. But from a Moraes standpoint, it's one of the biggest falls off a cliff in MMA that I can remember in a very, very, very long time.
Yeah. We'll always have the memories. We'll always have the memories of Marlon Moraes' run at the top as one of the best bantamweights in the world. But his retirement is kind of long overdue, and I'm thankful that he gets out now without any more damage, and the Nevada State Athletic Commission is putting a stop to it for good,
as they should.
The other thing, Zan, we had a guest interview at the PFL card. One former WBC heavyweight champion, Deontay Wilder, the Bronze Bomber himself. Now, Zan, Deontay Wilder has been one of the names that's been floating around ever since we heard these first desires of Francis Ngannou to go into boxing. And as part of his interview, he kind of teased the ideas, and he said, you don't really see boxers enter the MMA cage. Now, granted, Zan talked about the potential. Last week, we talked about with the whole Fury, John Jones thing, about, it would look like the next Randy Couture versus James Toney. We have seen, Zan, some boxers try their hands at professional mixed martial arts. Obviously, you had Clay Collard doing a run between both the PFL and Top Rank not too long ago. Biagio Ali Walsh is right now doing some fights with the Professional Fighters League. But what do you make of Wilder's offer out here? A two-part series, a boxing match, maybe late this year, early next year, and then a fight in the PFL.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is way different than a Jones Fury possibility because Deontay Wilder, compared to Tyson Fury, is actually willing to try his hand at MMA, which is something that apparently seems like Fury is not willing to do. So I think Wilder just throwing it out there that he would be interested in competing against Ngannou when both of them have similar styles, if you will, when they both remain on the feet. I think it's a very fascinating idea, and I think it's something that I would totally be down for if it happens. And I also think that both fights, if Wilder can get a little bit of MMA training in, same with Ngannou on the boxing side, I think it could be a very entertaining spectacle, and I think it could definitely be something that could help grow not just the PFL, but MMA and boxing is two collective sports. And truly, I think Wilder is thinking strategically, and I think he knows that the PFL is interested in these kinds of fights. And Wilder's not just saying, "Oh, come to my world," or Francis is not just saying, "Come to his." He actually wants to do it the right way and try his hand at both. And you have to just give him respect for that because he's one of the hardest punchers in the heavyweight division on the boxing side. And he would definitely give Francis some problems in that department. The question would be, would he have time in 6 to 12 months to adequately learn MMA in order to make that fight somewhat competitive?
I don't know about that. I mean, I could see Wilder just going in there with his striking. I mean, Zan, there's a chance that, Francis Ngannou would just try and strike as well. Maybe that brings about some fears, and that one, if not both of their fights could look like Francis Ngannou's fight with Derek Lewis. But no, Zan, seriously, I mean, to be very serious, we talked about, the PFL is taking a risk. Francis Ngannou is taking a risk. He should have gone back to UFC, yada, yada. The fact that Deontay Wilder is now putting it out there to the public on a Professional Fighters League broadcast, it gives the interest out there, Zan. And it's sparking the idea that perhaps, Zan, Deontay Wilder has been the answer all along. The fact that he is willing not just to take on Francis Ngannou in boxing, but to go into the territory that Francis Ngannou is in, this case now the PFL. The fact that Wilder is willing to do this, and if the PFL can get the money right, and Zan, based on the signings that they've made since 2019, and the fact that they got Francis Ngannou the dream kind of deal, the bag that he wanted, I'm confident that the PFL can do this. That, if they can get the money right, if Wilder and Ngannou can sit and agree on those terms, this is a possibility. I know maybe I'm being a little too optimistic because not really necessarily for PFL, but Zan, you know what we always say about boxing.
It gets in its own way, and it does almost all the time. Almost every single week we do this show, something bad happens in the boxing realm, and we'll get to the bad news of this week because there's always bad news, but you were 100% right.
But this, to me, Zan, like I said, the answer all along could have been Deontay Wilder, and the opportunity's there. It's been thrown out there. Now we gotta wait and see if this is just a little tease, that's just gonna leave us groaning again, or if there is interest. Because, Zan, if Wilder and Ngannou can get this done, sign me up. I'm watching both fights. I'm paying for both fights.
Oh, 100%. And if I could even do my very best at going to one, I would be more than happy to go to one and spend the money for the other one for sure. I think it would be a very entertaining two-part series, and I think a lot of people would be interested in seeing how both men do because I think it is a chance to do some massive business if promoted the right way. And also, to be quite frank, amazing business for ESPN. You'd have a chance to make a fight in the top rank realm, and you would also have a chance to make a fight under the PFL banner. Both, of course, are on ESPN, so it's good for everybody involved.
Absolutely. That's the other thing. Big opportunity here for ESPN as well. All right. Let's get into the bad boxing, as you kind of alluded to. So, Zan, I completely did not realize once again until Sunday, the day that it happened, that Floyd Mayweather was fighting an exhibition. And he took on Zan John Gotti III. Yes, the grandson of the notorious criminal, part of the Gotti my family. And Zan, John Gotti III, well, has recently been an MMA prospect, one to watch out for. But I mean, after the kind of crap that you saw in the exhibition, no, this was horrible.
Yeah, this just wasn't it. And it's one of those fights that, or one of those clips rather, that you could just watch on social media really quick and scroll past it, because that's just the bad side of boxing, where you get these freak show kind of fights that don't really make sense and just have eyeballs on them. This was one of them, and it definitely didn't make either guy look good. Certainly for Floyd Mayweather, obviously his legacy is set in stone when it comes to legitimate boxing matches. This not being one of them, this being an exhibition, but still it goes to show that Mayweather's just doing this sort of as a joke now, and this was another example of that.
Yeah, I mean, he's doing it for the money. He's doing it just to keep his name out there. But Zan, I mean, if he's ever trying to recreate the success of the kind of freak show fight he had, the crossover with Conor McGregor, I mean, Zan, you could even get, and he did get, a Paul brother in there. It just will not do. I don't know why Floyd is doing this. It feels like shits and giggles.
Oh, without a doubt.
Zan, actually, a couple other news stories that we do have to get to, because on the day that we are recording this news, this couple of news items are breaking left and right. WBO Junior Welterweight Championship win at just 25 years old. Teofimo Lopez has announced his retirement.
Oh wow. Well, after watching his last fight, that would have not been that would have not been what I would have expected right away. One of the most entertaining fighters of the last several years, and I truly wish him the best in whatever he decides to do in the future. Although I do think, given his age, I think we could see him back in the future. I think, as much as it says it's a retirement, I think it's more so, to me, and I could be jumping the gun, but to me, this feels like a break to figure out what he wants to do next. I don't know if you feel similarly, but I still think he still has so much potential. So it's unfortunate to see him retired so young, in my opinion.
Yeah, I pretty much don't buy it. I mean, Zan, just a few years ago, this guy beat Vasily Lomachenko to be the face of the lightweight division, now claiming the junior welterweight championship. Lopez tells the ESPN on Monday, quote, "I'm going to be announcing my retirement to the sport of boxing. Blood, sweat, and tears I've done for the sport at a young age, 25 years young. I have a lot of ideas. I have a lot of things in mind for the sport of boxing. I really can't do that if I'm always in the gym training and preparing for another upcoming fight or bout. So I'm really just focusing right now on that task." He is pretty much brushing off, Zan, the possibility of a bout with Devin Haney or a rematch with George Kambosos Jr. Again, I agree with you. I don't know, Zan, if I necessarily agree with him retiring at 25 years old. I don't know if I agree that it's going to be a permanent retirement. I could see him coming back for one of those two kind of fights, if not both of those fights. I mean, congratulations to him for all the success. You know, if this really is the end, I wish him well, and congrats to him on all that he's accomplished in the sport. I just don't know if this is going to stay. You know what we talk about with retirement in combat sports, especially with a young age like this.
1000%.
And another headline, San, that's actually a little more recent from the time we're recording this. Canelo Alvarez is starting to look at potential opponents for Mexican Independence Day weekend, and he is eyeing potential bouts with Jamal Charlo and Badu Jack.
Yeah, I'm down for either of those two fights. I'm just curious to see which one it's going to be. If it's either of those two guys or another opponent. Regardless, whenever Canelo fights, I'm always tuning in. So happy for him, and I hope that either of those fights can get done for sure.
All right, that's just to get some boxing headlines that are a little more breaking from the time we're recording out of the way. Zan, one other thing before we get into the previews. kind of alluded to it before. Conor McGregor in the headlines again, not for something tough, but for, I don't know, just another face palm kind of moment. So Conor McGregor making an appearance in Miami during Game 4 of the NBA Finals. He participated in a halftime skit with Bernie, the Miami Heat's mascot, a skit in which Conor McGregor would basically punch Bernie's lights out and then would use, I don't know, Xander, it's some spray that he's basically, a spokesperson and developer for. And, the spray it's kind of a pain relief kind of spray that he would put it on the jaw to get Bernie feeling better. Unfortunately, Zan, the skit went wrong, in which he apparently punched Bernie too hard, and then Zan, after he did the one, boom, shot to the jaw, which sent Bernie to the floor, he followed it up with the MMA classic, the hammer fist to the face right afterwards, and apparently the individual in the Bernie mascot costume was in so much pain that he needed to be transported to a medical facility.
Yeah, all I have to say about this is who cares? It was just a clip to get clicks for every single site that wrote about it, and I hope the Heat mascot is okay, and we can let bygones be bygones. So I will say, even though this is a headline on our show based on the tenets of journalism, I do not consider this a news story.
I think it's a story just for the fact that it's Conor. Again, something has gone wrong and it involves him. It's just like, same as it ever was. Same as it ever was. Same as it ever was. Same as it ever was.
No doubt
Do I
about
need to
it.
play the full song?
No, because it gets more and more annoying with every lyric.
And you'll find yourself saying, "This is not my beautiful octagon."
Literally.
All right. Let's get into the reason why I know you're here, Zan. Let's preview this Bellator card this weekend. Should be absolutely fun. Headlined: Vadim Nemkov, Yoel Romero. This fight was previously booked, canceled because of injury. We're finally gonna get it. Vadim Nemkov is going to test himself against the power of Yoel Romero.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say this. This fight's gonna be action-packed fireworks. You guys have never seen either of these two fight before. They are never in a boring fight. I think Nemkov's wrestling overpowers Romero. I think Nemkov wins a decision. I think Romero probably protests something that happens mid-fight, either a low blow or something like that, and it winds up being a loss. I think Nemkov defends the light heavyweight championship, and I think goes to show that he is one of Bellator's best fighters in the world, if not without a doubt one of the best MMA fighters in the world in any promotion. And yes, I do think you could very well see Romero think about hanging up the gloves, just considering how long he's been in MMA and how many chances he's had to win a world title. And this is very cool for me personally, because I was at Whitaker Romero 2 at UFC 225. So I am very lucky to see Romero again in person for the second time in what could very well be his last fight or one of his last fights of his career.
One of the best fights of 2018. That was incredible. And Zan, that could have been for middleweight championship, but of course he ends up missing weight for that fight. Actually, Zan, hang on one second here. I have a message. Yoel Romero wants me to send you a message, Zan. He has heard your comments and he has something he'd like to say.
See you soon, boy.
Yeah, well, I will see him soon, as early as this afternoon at the first pre-fight media availability, which I am very much looking forward to. I can't wait. It's going to be a very entertaining week with the Soldier of God on the mic. It's gonna be awesome.
And the MMA Outsiders is going to be with you live. We're going to give you as much coverage as possible for Bellator 297, so make sure to check us out across social media at MMA Outsiders ETB. We'll get as much as we can up to this YouTube channel to give you all of the latest, interviews, press conferences, and so much more. But yeah, Zan, I completely 100% agree with you. I think Vadim Nemkov, the fact that he was able to get past Ryan Bader, I think he can get past Yoel Romero. I think as much as Yoel Romero has power, I think Vadim Nemkov, you nailed it on the head. I think his wrestling and grappling is just going to be way too much. And if he ever gets to control Zam, Nemkov has good power as well. So I'm going to say Vadim Nemkov as well retains the light heavyweight championship. Should be a good one. Co-main event. This one, Zan, has even more stakes to it. Sergio Pettis is back, and he is going to be defending the featherweight, the bantamweight championship against the featherweight champion Patricio Pitbull. If Patricio Pitbull wins this fight, not only is he the first individual, Zan, in Bellator history to be a double champ twice, he is going to be the first ever individual to win 3 division championships in Bellator. And it's Patricio Pitbull, perhaps the longtime face of, not perhaps, he is the longtime face of Bellator MMA. Plus, you got the winner of this fight, Zan, who is going to have to defend against the winner of the Bellator Bantamweight Grand Prix in Patchy.
Yeah, this is a high-stakes fight. Patchy Mix, I would assume, is going to be there. I have not been told either such way. If he is there, we will get all the coverage on Mix that we possibly can. But this is a high-stakes fight, one of the biggest fights in Bellator history. It's hard to pick a winner in this one. I just think Pitbull is slightly better than Pettis. I think it will be a very high-level, action-packed fight. I think Pitbull finishes him late, either third or fourth round. But Sergio Pettis' speed and his striking, man, I just don't see how this fight goes the distance. And truly, I think it'll be one of those fights where the entire Wintrust Arena crowd is going to be on their feet, because I think this is a chance to be not only a fight of the night contender, but a Bellator fight of the year contender without question.
Hot takes, and I'd say this might be a bit of a hot take. I think, considering the fact that it's champ versus champ, it's Patricio Pitbull, the history and Sergio Pettis' return, and the potential of a fight of night like you're talking about with all the stakes and how good this fight could be. I think this is one of those times, Dan, where in mixed martial arts, the fact that the heavier weight is the main event, I think this is one that Bellator got wrong. I think Pettis versus Pitbull should have been the main event of this card, just because of the high intensity and high stakes of this. Because if they put on the kind of fight, Zan, that you were considering, fight of the night, potential fight of the year, of Patricio Pitbull making that history, that's going to be very hard for Vadim Nemkov and Yoel Romero to follow.
Agreed, and as a unbiased member of the media, as I like to think that I am, as well as a Bellator rankings panel, I will say that I agree with you, and I think that these two matchups should have been flipped. I hope this doesn't come across as a negative. It's more so just a suggestion than anything else. But those were the cards that we were dealt. Although I do think when it's champ versus champ, that always has to be the main event, in my opinion.
Yeah, and granted, Zan, it's not maybe a Bellator thing, because like I said, that seems to be a commonality in mixed martial arts, where the heavier weight class, headlines. I think the only time we really don't see that, Zan, is Professional Fighters League, where everything seems to have a mix. I know women's lightweights always headline the championship cards the last few years, because that's been Kayla Harrison. It'll be interesting to see what they do this time around. But yeah, nevertheless, I agree with you. I think you said Pitbull gets a finish third, fourth round, right?
Pitbull will get a finish, I think, about 3.5 minutes into round 3. And if need be, he'll probably finish it in the fourth. If it goes to a decision, I think Pettis wins, but I am taking Pitbull.
All right. I'm going to agree with you. I think Patricio Pitbull is a little too much of a tough task for Pettis in his first fight back from major injury. And I think, Zan, this is just setting up for Patricio Pitbull to make Bellator history and, further his legacy, Zan, as one of the best fighters to have never fought in the UFC. And it will be really fun to see Patricio Pitbull take on Patchy Mix.
Without a doubt.
All right. The other two fights on the main card, Zan, we got Corey Anderson, Phil Davis, battle of light heavyweights.
Yeah, this one just screams wrestle. And It also screams decision. I like Phil Davis in this spot. I think he's just a little bit better than Corey Anderson. Don't know how Corey Anderson's gas tank is going to hold up. Nemkov really kind of did expose Anderson in his last fight. I think Phil Davis is just a little bit better, has the experience factor also. I think Davis wins a close decision, but definitely, if you're looking for a solid bet here, over 2.5 rounds, Anderson versus Davis is my lock on this card. No question about it. Decision.
Zain, if I had the quicker ability to search, I would have searched for that Khabib Conor clip where they go, let's wrestle.
100%.
I agree with you. I think Phil Davis's experience is going to help him out here. I think it'll be a very close fight. I think it should be a close and competitive fight, but I'm going to lean towards Davis on this one. And then you have the opener. Zain, your boy, the Chicago native Daniel James comes home, takes on Gokam Sarakam. And Zain, this might be a little tougher of a touch for DJ, but no, I'm gonna say late first, early second, he gets this job done.
You know how I feel about this one. Partially, this is the only reason why I'm in the building is to see Daniel James' second homecoming. I think this is going to be another coming out party for Daniel James. He's going to blow the roof off of Wintrust Arena, and I think it's a nasty stoppage of Gokam. But I will say this: Gokam is a tough guy. If he can survive the first round, it'll get very, very interesting. But I would say Daniel James wins in the first round again, punches his ticket to a potential heavyweight title shot, and has another epic post-fight interview, and I cannot wait to see it.
Moving on, Zain, a couple of fights to talk about with the PFL. Heavyweight main event. The heavyweights and women's featherweights this week. That's also going to be on Friday. So you'll be busy with Bellator. I'll be busy with the PFL. Main event, Ante D'Elia taking on Maurice Green. Zain, despite what Ariel Helwani has previously said about Ante D'Elia, which you echoed his words, you know, I am a little more familiar with Ante D'Elia's game. And, you know, I like Maurice Green, but I just question, you know, his technical skills and his gas tank. And I think D'Elia will be able to outlast.
Yeah, I don't have a pick for this fight, but I can say with confidence that this fight's not going the distance, and either of these two are getting finished.
All right, co-main event, women's featherweight headliners. Zain, this is an interesting one. I kind of have a liking for. It's gonna be Larissa Pacheco taking on Amber LeBrock, and I think Zain. I think Amber LeBrock is very talented. I think there is upset alert in this one, but Larissa Pacheco, the only one that has not been stopped, the only one who has not, that she has been unable to defeat, and she finally conquered her demons in November, was Kayla Harrison. So I think this is going to be good. I think this is going to be good for Larissa.
Yeah, I think Pacheco gets the job done. I think she wins a decision. LeBrock is obviously very tough. She is a great skill set herself. I think the only way she can win this fight is if she stops Pacheco on the feet. But I think Pacheco's wrestling is going to be a little bit too much for her. She could actually submit Amber LeBrock, but I don't think she will. So let's go with the safe pick here and say that Pacheco wins a unanimous decision.
I completely agree. You and I are on a good wavelength on that one. Last fight to preview, Zain. UFC Vegas 75 on Saturday after all the Bellator and PFL madness on Friday. The main event, former middleweight title challengers, former Israel Adesanya foes, Marvin Vettori, Jared Cannonier in action.
Yeah, back at the UFC Apex, of course. Let's go Apex.
Apex.
Yeah, we're back at the UFC Apex, which probably means this one is another 5-round decision. And I actually think that Jared Cannonier beats Marvin Vettori, a very, very closely debated fight. 48-47 on all three judges' scorecards. Could go either way. I just think Cannonier's gas tank is a little bit better. Vettori will probably try to clinch him against the cage, do absolutely nothing on the offensive side, leave himself open and lose a decision 3-2 in a pretty clear decision for Cannonier, in my opinion.
I am going to counter. I think Vettori's grappling is going to do him a little more of a favor. And I'm going to flip. I'm going to go 48-47 for Vettori. Although I don't know if I could say unanimous. I think, Zan, this one could end up being a split decision because, of course, it will be.
Yeah, knowing UFC Apex decisions lately, I would not be surprised. So there you go.
That's going to do it for this edition of the MMA Outsiders. So make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you get notified of every MMA Outsiders a piece of content, including anything that we're going to upload to this channel in case Zan gets any sort of footage he wants to upload for Bellator 297 coverage this weekend. So make sure also you follow us across social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at MMA Outsiders ETB. Follow the network as well at ETB Network. That's Zain Bando, staff writer for BJPen.com, Bellator Rankings Committee member. You can follow him at Zambando99. I'm Tom Albano. You can find my work over at Fansided MMA, PFL website contributor as well. Find me at Thomas J. Albano across social media. And, of course, hit that notification bell so you get notified of everything that we do with Bellator 297, all our episodes. And for tonight, when we have our third episode of Tough Enough.
Yeah, for sure. So be sure to tune into that as well if you want all of the Ultimate Fighter nuggets. But with that being said, I'm Zan. He's Tom. That's going to do it for episode 42. We thank you again for tuning in. A lot of action this weekend. Don't forget a heavy Friday of MMA. We have Bellator on one end of the spectrum, PFL on the other. I have Bellator, Thomas PFL, and then, of course, UFC on Saturday. So, again, thank you for tuning in. We greatly appreciate it. And keep it locked in for all of the Bellator 297 coverage coming up over the next few days as I have the controls over in Chicago for that. So stay tuned for everything. And again, thanks for tuning in. And of course, before we get out of here, we just wanted to leave you with one final message. Be Joe Pyfer.
Be Joe Pyfer. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you next week. We'll see you later tonight for the next episode of Tough Enough. And keep it locked in here for the MMA Outsiders with all our Bellator 297 coverage. Take care, everyone.
Take care.